Hello. I've got a bunch of decks out in my messy card space right now because I'm just trying to go in kind of deep. This video was originally going to be about the court cards and how alternate decks can help you add more to your memory banks and dictionary of meanings for the court cards. However, it has branched off into how alternate decks can just help in general add on to the personal style. The Rider-Waite-Smith deck has some really great depictions. The colors, the symbology is all very important. And I highly urge you to study that, hang on to that, look into it, because if you just run to an alternate deck, you're gonna bond with it, which is great. But having that basic, the fundamentals, is so important in my opinion. That said, looking at the Mood Tarot here, I think the Mood Tarot is fun because not only is it hilarious, but it does kind of comment on things from a reader's perspective. This card is just funny. I mean, if you can't remember what the card's about, it's going to kind of trigger you. This card, to me, shouldn't really need any triggering, and that's why it's just kind of funny. But in other cards, like the court cards or in some of the majors, this is where this deck can actually be helpful, not just funny. This one in particular, some people may confuse the Hierophant with the Emperor. It's like, how do you keep them straight? For me, once seeing this deck, it really solidifies what that's about and how to tell those two apart. Now, I didn't grab the Emperor, but hey. Here's another card from the Mood Tarot I just thought was funny, but it's also very spot on in terms of how to interpret this card from a traditional standpoint. Temperance in this deck is really cool because you're talking about the mixing, the balance, the alchemy of temperance. And temperance for me is one that I used to get confused with the Star, kind of like the Wheel of Fortune and the World. So those are cards like in an alternate deck that I would look for, that not only I can tell the difference right away, but bring some sort of peace to my memory banks. I want to learn something every step of my journey. This one was just an interesting take. This was really cool. I thought that the Devil was a pretty good take on vices, free weed and chocolate. So I think that's what we have there. And then in terms of the court cards I think are the hardest of all the decks, or of all the cards in the deck to figure out. So looking at the court cards in the Mood Tarot, I think it gives a little perspective. And when I'm looking at various decks, or if I'm trying to read the tarot dice or the Marseille, I may think of, or another deck's card may pop up in my head. And that's just a way for me to trigger my memory banks. And this is something that I used to do in the past, not so much anymore. Now it's more like random cards will pop in to add like clarification. But I think that this is, very telling and very fitting. So if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. So their take on it is really interesting. Oops. So we're talking about the Knights' movement. He is, interestingly enough, Trivia Night champion. It's a good way. I mean, he's the master. I would think more of, Trivial Pursuit, but, that's just straws. The Ladies' Man is a great way of explaining this card. So I'm glad, you know, they, in reverse, it could have been like the drunk lady's man. But totally. And, you know, she's not screwing around, which goes back to the Illuminati Tarot. I just pulled out these two cards, but the court cards in these decks correspond to people. And if you can get into the symbology of who Henry VIII was and what his personality was about, it gives you a lot of information about this card, just as the Queen of Swords. She was, you know, as a historical figure, somebody who was kind of balanced. She didn't rule with her feelings. She very much tried to use her head and follow more of a masculine approach. But at the same time, she also tried to embody the Queen Mother and be there for the people. So, or Queen Mother, you know, Queen Mary. Mother Mary. So the point here is, I mean, she's really trying to embody and you know, keep both those perspectives while still being looked at as, you know, in that place, which I think is very fitting. And ever since I've seen this deck, I've kind of always seen the Queen of Swords as Elizabeth I. So, I don't know, pretty cool. The Page of Cups is kind of interesting because, again, the pages they're little, they're small, they're childish, they get distracted, they're messengers. I love how this is, because I mean, this can be, whoa, so true, my pile of cards is falling down. Now we move on to the Housewives Tarot. This was a deck that really rearranged my thinking. I didn't give it enough credit in the beginning, and then when I started to see more of the pictures, I was like, this really makes sense. And again, it really added to my repertoire or memory banks of information in the cards, and I really gravitate towards decks like this. So we've got the Page of Cups, the do-gooder. You know, he's the nice kid. He's the sweet, emotional guy. The Knight of Pentacles, keeping up with the Joneses. The Queen of Wands. See, again, you know, if we want to go back and compare this Moods Tarot, they call the Queen of Wands a Karen. And here, she's the bitchy mom who really needs a Valium. Now with the Housewives Tarot, it's really important to go back to, you know, to the 50s, to go back to this era and really embody what's going on or their perspective at the time. So again, like the Knight of Wands, he reminds me of Dennis the Menace. And this is actually the card that kind of prompted doing this whole video, and how the Knight of Wands and this card really brought new credence to and made that court card come alive. The Queen of Pentacles with her family, all in alignment. And there's the Queen of Swords, willing to emasculate if she has to. The Queen of Cups. Now, this is, the swords in this deck always made me laugh. And the Page of Swords running with scissors, I thought was very appropriate. And if you can put running with scissors into the thought process of kind of ADHD and not really paying attention, it makes so much sense about decisions that you might make if this card was in a certain position. The King of Swords, having it all together. The Knight of Cups. Again, Mr. Bad Boy. Well, kind of, most of the knights are bad boys, but, or can be. I love how this is, because it shows how, you know, the creative, not, yeah, I guess creativity would be, I'm thinking ingenuity in Wands more, but, you know, how he's a great engineer. And that's a word that it wouldn't come to mind to me in a standard deck if I wasn't looking at that. Now, the Revelations Tarot is another interesting take, another interesting deck, because it wasn't just a flat deck. This deck kind of reminds me of stained glass, and it shows the upright image, and then in reverse, it kind of looks at the, you know, the meanings kind of change. So we have this looking towards, and then flopping away from. So look at the King of Wands, for instance. Right, and then reverse. So talk about like the ladies' man and falling prey to crap. But, you know, Wands as a sexual suit. Dun, dun, dun. And again, the Queen of Wands. Upright, doing things. In reverse, the emasculating bitch. So, the Queen of Cups. And there she is, kind of overwhelmed with her feelings, and this kind of reminds me of borderline personality disorder and like abandonment issues, and people who are like controlling and codependent, you know, in their negative. It's the Queen of Pentacles in reverse. Boy, was she unhappy, huh? The King of Swords is interesting here because you can see how this ripple goes right through his head, right through his rationale. Whereas here he stands firm. I love the Page of Swords here, the way it's bashful. And this is great in terms of breaking free from the norm. The pages in this deck are really interesting. I think they give a lot of depth to the cards, and that's why I'm trying not to talk too much. I want to give you a chance to kind of see your own interpretation. And there's a lot of feeling for me in these cards. There's a lot of emotion that comes through in these pictures. And I think that's it, other than I did have a few cards that I wanted to go through from the Housewives Tarot. The Hierophant. This deck back, you know, this is the beginning of TV, and it was the start of where we once sat around the hearth or the dinner table, and that was the center of the home. The TV then became the center of the home, and we, you know, it was kind of literally, they called it the boob tube. You would zone out, but you'd listen to the news. It was almost like this was more important. Look at what happened with War of the Worlds. Granted, that was a radio, not a TV. But it's about how media and things influence us. And so instead of that influence again being around the church, was generally about this card, the TV kind of became the new church. And so this was like so fitting. It was like, aha. And Judgment here, this relates back to the devil in this deck. But Judgment, look at how she's judging herself for her meatiness, or, you know, what she's put on. The Empress, the successful mother. the tower with the Jello mold. This was a popular thing, but this would have been a cringe-worthy moment for a lot of us, especially if you saw the meme I recently saw, which was all vegetables in a Jello mold. It was really gross. The temperance, again, the mixing, the alchemy of putting things together. This is an interesting take, even on the minor arcana cards. Very interesting take on putting things together, you know, working. And, oh, I don't know why the Nine of Wands was in here, but I think that I didn't have anything in particular I wanted to say about this, but here's the Devil. So if you look at the Devil verse Judgment, you can see the various vices and where it leads to. And that's about all I have, I think. So that's just, you know, kind of a glimpse at a few decks and how court cards especially can stand out, and what I'm looking for myself in a deck, and how alternate decks can add to your vocabulary. So I hope that was a good trip down what I want to call memory lane, but if these are new decks to you, then it's a whole new opportunity to see if there are cards that you might want to purchase in the future, or if this changes your attitude towards alternate decks. A lot of people think of reading the standard cards as you need to follow the standard in order to be traditional, or to do, you know, even to get the fundamentals of tarot. And I guess what I'm saying is, while I respect and believe in the fundamentals of tarot, I think they can be found, and alternate decks can help you find those fundamentals. So don't be scared of that, but be aware of it when looking at alternate decks, because some authors are more intellectual and a little more versed in the fundamentals than others. Some people are more about the pictures, other people are more about the symbolism. I've really studied the colors and the various small symbols within the couple schools, the Aleister Crowley's deck and the Marseille, and then of course Rider-Waite, and what Pamela Coleman-Smith brought to life in those cards. It just, you know, revolutionized the world of tarot as we know it. But looking at those various schools and putting them together, just, yeah. Okay, I lost my train of thought. I'm gonna wrap this up before I babble anymore, and I hope to see you soon.